In this video, I want us to see how to use bcrypt for a simple Express.js server. The idea is that if we have to save the passwords of our users in our database, we're not going to just use plain text for the passwords. We're only going to store the hashes of these passwords, and this is considered much more secure. So to get started, let's init my new empty folder as an npm project, and to do that I'm going to use npm init. So npm init -y, and we have our package.json file. Here it is. Let me quickly change the type. So instead of common.js, I'm going to use module. And while we're here, let me also update my script. So I'm simply going to define here the start script, and this is going to be node followed by the name of my JavaScript file that I'm going to create in a second. I'm just going to call it app.js. And since this is going to be a server, life is going to be much easier if we're adding here the watch flag, so --watch. Another thing I would like us to do before diving into the code itself is installing the packages that we're going to need. So let's run npm install, and the packages that we're going to need are Express and of course bcrypt.js. Bcrypt.js is the package that we're going to use to find the hashes of the password. So let's go ahead and install these two packages, and we can now see in our dependencies section both bcrypt.js and Express. Let's now go ahead and create app.js, and here it is. So let's start by importing Express, and now we can create the object for the Express server, and let's also define the port that we're going to use. And now that we have that, we can ask our server to start listening to this port, to port 5000. Now, just to make sure that our server is up and running, I'm going to add here one simple get route, so app.get, and the address for this route is going to be the root of the website, so /, and I need to attach a callback to this route, so request response, and all I'm going to send as a response back from this route is a simple JSON, so response.json. Let's say that the key is going to be message, and the value is going to be OK. Let me now start my server, and to do that I'm going to use my npm script, so npm start, and we can see that the server is running. Let me now fire up Postman, and let's try to send a request to this route, and it's going to be a GET request, of course, directed at this port 5000, and if I send the request, I can see the JSON that I'm sending from my server. Next, let me add the sign up route, and this is going to be a post route because we expect the user to send the password, and it's much more secure to use a post request for this kind of information rather than a GET request. So app.post, and the address is going to be sign up, and let's create the callback that will take care of requests directed at this route. So first I'm going to assume that the request's body contains the username and the password. These are the ones that they want to use, so let's extract it from the request's body, and let's start by logging them, and let's try to send a request to this route. So it's going to be a post request, and the URL is sign up, and now I need to go to the body of the request, and here I'm going to choose raw and change the type from text to JSON. And here I have to provide the username and the password because this is what the server is expecting. So here I'm creating my JSON, and let's provide a value for the username and another value for the password. So for the username I chose my own name, which is Matan, and for the password ABC123. Now we should probably return some response from this route, so let's keep it simple and just send back the username. So response.json, and the object is simply going to be the username. And if I send my request, we can see that it fails, and this is because I forgot to use the middleware required for passing JSON. Luckily, we have one built into Express, so this is the one that we're going to use. So let me add it here, and it's as simple as using the express.json middleware. So let's try again, and we can see that the username was sent back, and here we can see both the username and the password. Now, since I want to keep things simple and not use a real database, we're going to use a file. So it's going to be a JSON file, and let's call it users.json. And this JSON file will contain all of our users. So for every user, we need to store their username and their password. And I'm going to start with an empty array, so I can already use this array. It doesn't contain anything useful yet, but it is a placeholder. So once I receive a sign up request, I want to update my database. I want to update this array, the array in my JSON file. So I'm going to start by reading the content of the file that I currently have. And since we are going to work with files, we should import the fs module. So here I'm going to add the import. And now when I get the new request, I want to start by reading the content of the file that I currently have. To do that, I'm going to use fs.readFileSync. Now, this is not enough on its own, because now I have the content of the file, but I probably want to pass the JSON so I can work with the actual array that's represented by this JSON. To do that, I can use json.parse. So json.parse and I'm going to parse what I just read from the file, and let's store the result in a user's constant. And now let me push the information for the new user to this array. So let's access the array, the user's array, and I'm going to use push to add something to this array. And the thing that we are going to add to this array is an object, of course, and the object is simply going to contain the username and the password. And now that I have this updated array, I want to convert it back into JSON. I can do that using json.stringify. So let's stringify our array, and let's write the updated JSON back to the file so we can see here and store here the updated array that also should contain the new user. So to do that, we can use fs.write file sync. And to keep my JSON file nice and easy to read, I'm going to add here now and to, and this is going to add new lines and indentation in my JSON file. This way it's going to be a bit more human readable. And finally, since we are adding a new resource to our server, we should probably set the status code as 201, and let's just send the updated users array. So this is the users array, and this is what we're going to send back as the response to this request. So let's move our database file over here, and if I send my request again, I can see that my user was added to the database, so the username and the password. If I now try to add another user, say Joe, I can send this request, and I now have 2 users in my database. The thing is that right now we are saving the passwords as plain text. This is exactly the thing that we are not supposed to do. As responsible developers, we are expected to never do such a thing, because if our users trust us, they expect us to never save, never store the passwords as plain text. The only thing that we are allowed to store in a database is a hash of a password, and never the password itself. So to generate a hash of a password, we are going to use bcrypt.js. So let's start by importing bcrypt. So I'll add it here. And here, right after extracting the password from the request itself, I'm going to find a hash for this password. So let's call it password hash. And the way we are using bcrypt to find the hash for a password is bcrypt, or in my case bc, because this is how I imported it, dot hash. And as you can see, there is a synchronous version and an asynchronous version. This is the one I'm going to use. And as a parameter, we need to pass the password itself. The second parameter is the salt length, like how long the random part is going to be. And generally speaking, the longer it is, the safer it is, but it is going to take longer. So the idea is to find a good balance between security and processing time. I'm going to go with 10, and it is recommended to go with at least 10. Now, since this is an asynchronous function, I'm going to add here await. And since we are now using await, we have to make this function asynchronous. Now that we computed a hash for the password, we can save this in our database instead of the plain text password. So instead of password, I'm going to store the hash of the password. So let's get back to our database and let me start fresh. So I'm going to remove everything I have here. And once again, let's try to send the request. And we can see that Joe was added to the database, but this time instead of the plain text password, we have here only a hash of the password. Now, the good thing about bcrypt is that if I now try to add another user, a second user, and this user is going to use the same password, so let me send the request for this user, we can see that it was added to the database. But even though these 2 users used the same password, the hash is completely different. So this is the strength of bcrypt, and this is what makes it so hard to recover the actual password from the hash. Because for the same password, bcrypt is going to generate a different hash every single time. Let's now see how we can implement logging using these passwords. So let me add here a new route for login. And once again, this is going to be a post route because the body of the request is going to contain sensitive information. So the URL is going to be login, and the callback for this route is also going to be asynchronous. And once again, I'm going to assume that the body of the request contains both the username and the password. So once again, we're going to retrieve them from the body of the request, just like we did here. And now we will have to look for the user that is trying to log in our database. So let's take another look at the database. And to be able to do that, we should probably access our file and parse this JSON so we have an actual array that we can go over. So I'm going to do exactly what we did here. And this way we will have the array represented by this JSON. And I'm going to look for the user in my database based on their username. To do that, I'm going to go over my array, which is users, so users. And to find the element we're looking for, I'm going to use find. As a parameter to find, I need to pass a callback, and the parameter of this callback is the current element in the array, the one that we are going over right now. So let's say user. Now if the username for this user, so user.username, is equal to the username in the request's body, then that's it. This is the user that we are looking for. And if we went over all of the elements in the array and didn't find anyone, we are going to end up with undefined. So let's store the object for the user that we found in a constant called user. Now if not user, or in other words, if user is undefined, which means that the username in the request does not exist in the database, I'm going to send back a response letting the client know that the user was not found. Now, if we are here, if we got to this line, we know that the user exists. In other words, the username that is requested in this request was found in the database. So the next step would be to check if the password that they provided is the correct password. The thing is that we don't have the original password itself, so what are we going to compare it to? This is why bcrypt provides us with another method called compare. So bcrypt.compare. The first parameter to compare is the actual password, the password the user just sent. And the second parameter is the hash that we want to compare it to. So this is going to be the hash of the password of the user that we found. So user.passhash. Now once again, compare is an asynchronous function, and this is why I'm going to add here a wait. And as a result, I'm going to get a Boolean value, and let's store it in a constant called isPasswordValid. Now if the password is not valid, it means that a wrong password was provided. So in this case, I'm once again going to return 400 as the status code, but let me just change the message to wrong password. Now, if we are here, if we got here, we know that the user was found and that the password provided for this user is correct. This should result in a successful login attempt. So here, I'm going to return status code 200, and we should let the client know that the user logged in. So let's move our database here. And let's try to send a login request. So first let me try to send the correct password, and we can see login successful. But if I change my password to a wrong password and I send my request this way, we can see wrong password.